Hello everybody, this is the creation of the Sihedron Circle. I did film some of this, so let's take a quick look. So this is the aquarium piece of one of the heads I purchased at a pet store, and this is a copy created with plaster of Paris. So the right hand one was about $15 at a local pet store, and I needed 7 of these, so I was like, well, let's try to create a copy. So I went to Michael's and bought some clay, some modeling clay, and poured in plaster of Paris. So I created a 2-piece mold, and I had no idea what a 2-piece mold was. I had no idea what I was doing, so I took some experimentation. And after I created the 2-piece mold, I was able to pour in plaster of Paris after I made this with modeling clay from Michael's. And what pops out are several pieces, which then you have to glue together. And I actually found out plaster of Paris makes a great glue as well. Plaster of Paris is real nice because you just add it to water, and here I have some in here. That's a little bit because what I'm doing is using this little plastic eyedropper I picked up for a few cents, and I'm going to use this plaster of Paris to actually fuse together the mold pieces. And here's a snapshot of 6 of the heads. That's kind of what I could fit in here. And they came out pretty well. You know, once you get the hang of it, it's not so bad, and you can create these pretty cheaply once you make the mold. The hard part was actually getting the pieces to pop out of the mold. So I coated it with what was recommended was like vegetable oil, which seemed to help a lot. And bending, of course, the mold would help pop it out. Eventually, the mold starts breaking down, and maybe I could only do 15 to 20 of these. But all I needed was 7, so that worked out pretty well. Of course, after creating all these heads, the next step was to actually paint them, and I used a sponge technique, which is really easy. You won't believe how fast you can paint these things. It only takes a half hour at most to do all these. You start with a base color black, cover them all with black, and then you use a dark gray and on a wet sponge, and you just stipple that on. And then after that dries, you take another sponge and you with a lighter gray and stipple that on just over the raised areas, and it does a fantastic job. If we take a closer look here, you can just see the detail. The roughness that's captured with the clay and plaster of Paris really makes it look rough, and this painting technique just is fantastic. Now, I think you will notice a little bit of yellow in this rock. In a couple of the rocks I may have added a slight tan or yellow to make it more realistic looking. But overall, very simple technique of using the sponge, and it's just so fast, and it just comes out great. It looks fantastic. Speaking of using a quick painting technique and talking about rocks, this is another rock mold. I purchased this mold. This mold, I think it was from Woodland Scenics, and I just poured plaster of Paris into it and to get this kind of cliff face, because I wanted this section to have a cliff face. And the painting technique on this was really easy. It's messy, but really easy. Since it was messy, I really didn't photograph it, but basically what you do is you take these few colors. Again, start out with the base color like a black, and you really water it down and just kind of take either a sponge or a brush, and actually I think I used a foam brush, and just dab it in certain locations. Then go back to a lighter color off the base while it's still wet and sponge in different spots on the other color. Then go ahead, add some yellow, and then go back and add tan, and you just kind of dab it on and let it run together. Let the colors run together, and you get a really natural looking rock. It's so easy to paint a rock. It looks hard when it's done. You're like, wow, how long did that take to paint? Well, it literally will take a couple minutes, and that's what it took to do this one right here. Because this was supposed to happen in the winter, we needed to make this look like snow was everywhere. So a basic technique was actually to use baking soda, white PVC glue, which we got here, and white paint, and mix that into a consistency that you think looks like snow, and then dab that onto the rocks. This provided a foundation for snow, and this is what that looked like, and it came out okay. Sometimes it would crack when it dried, or it just didn't quite look right. But again, it's kind of the undercoat. Later on, what you would use is fake snow, this flex type powdery stuff that you would buy at a hobby store. Scenics, Outdoor Scenics, or Woodland Scenics has it, but this works pretty well as a base. Now the heads were done the same way, but first what I did was there's some adhesive which I'm spraying on, and I just kind of lightly coated and over the face. I wanted to give it kind of an icy, with snow blown look. So when snow blows on rocks, and here's actually the Games Workshop snow I was using. I was using Woodland Scenics and this. Now the first thing I did was just kind of naturally drop it on as if snow was just falling, and you can see where it sticks to the parts that protrude out, like the nose and some of the other ridges. And then what I did, well, wasn't quite satisfied with that. It was just to flick on bits of snow. This is a real fine, it's like a powder. It's almost like baking powder, but it's a synthetic, so it doesn't age or discolor after some time. And using this technique worked really well to kind of give it a snowy, frosty type look. Here you can see how that looks. It looks really good. It really looks like there's snow on that. Here's one of the before and after. You can really see how it adds to that snowy effect. It works really well. Now here's everything, the rocks and the heads on the base. Now the base was just a large piece of cardboard, and what I used was plaster of Paris to kind of create the drifts of the snow and the lumps. You can see that it's not a complete flat surface, so any of those bumps along the edge, and there's a couple of mounds in the middle. I just used plaster of Paris and created little ridges, and that worked out great. And then of course at the end you use that powdery snow to sprinkle on top of it. So you spray down the adhesive over the plaster of Paris and sprinkle the snow on top of it in multiple layers, and you end up with a fairly nice field that looks like it's full of fresh snow with different heights and depths and drifts and everything. And overall it looks really nice when it comes together. And of course this took a long time. I started working on this in November and finally finished it in February, right before we were originally going to play before our snow date. But it was a lot of fun to do. I just was watching these techniques and I just wanted to try it. And so it was a lot of fun to do. And wow, I think the effects look pretty good. It really looks like snow, and I think it really enhanced the scene. So that's the Sihedron Circle.